My name is Sophia, and at 28 years old, I thought I knew everything about loyalty and family bonds. Last Christmas morning changed everything when my mother casually mentioned over coffee that they had sold my Tesla and used the money for my brother's wedding. What she did not tell me was that this betrayal would unravel decades of family lies, expose a conspiracy that destroyed my trust forever, and ultimately lead to the most satisfying revenge I never saw coming. The truth about my family was far darker than I ever imagined. Before we dive into this wild family drama that will leave you questioning everything you know about blood loyalty, I would love to know where you are watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and while you are here, smash that like button and hit subscribe because this story has more twists than a soap opera. And trust me, you will want to see how karma finally catches up to the people who better saved. Thought they could destroy me. The conversation started innocently enough. Mom was flipping pancakes while Dad sat reading his newspaper, both acting like it was just another peaceful Christmas morning in our suburban Connecticut home. My younger brother Jake had already left with his fiancée Emma to visit her family, leaving behind wrapped presents and that familiar scent of pine from our massive Christmas tree. "Oh, honey, I forgot to mention," Mom said, without looking up from the stove, her voice carrying that fake casual tone I had learned to recognize over the years. "We needed to sell your car for Jake's wedding expenses. The venue deposit was more than we expected." I nearly choked on my orange juice. "You sold what now, your Tesla, sweetheart? You left it here when you moved to Seattle for that new job, so we figured you did not need it anymore." Jake really needed our help with the wedding costs. The audacity hit me like a physical blow. That Tesla Model S was not just any car. It was my first major purchase after landing my dream job as a software engineer at a tech startup. I had worked 80-hour weeks, lived on ramen noodles, and sacrificed social events for months to afford that car. More importantly, I had explicitly told them I was storing it at their house temporarily while I found proper parking in Seattle. "Mom, that car cost me $60,000. I told you I was coming back for it after the holidays." Dad finally looked up from his newspaper wearing that patronizing expression I remembered from childhood arguments. "Sophia, family comes first. Jake is starting his life with Emma and they needed our support. You have a good job now. You can buy another car." The casual dismissal in his voice made my blood boil, but what happened next revealed the true depth of their betrayal. Mom turned around with a bright smile as if she had just shared good news about the weather. "Besides, we got $45,000 for it. Not bad for a used car." Jake was so grateful he cried when we handed him the check. $45,000. They had sold my $60,000 car for $45,000 and acted like they had done me a favor. But the worst part was yet to come. "We also cleaned out your old bedroom while you were gone," Mom continued cheerfully. "Donated most of your stuff to charity. That room makes a perfect office for your father's consulting business now." My childhood bedroom, gone. Along with photo albums, yearbooks, my grandmother's jewelry that had been passed down to me, and countless memories I had planned to retrieve during this visit. They had systematically erased my presence from their home and sold my property without a second thought. "You threw away Grandma Rose's jewelry." My voice came out as barely a whisper. Mom waved her hand dismissively. "That old stuff was just collecting dust. Emma has much more modern taste anyway." "Emma? What does Jake's fiancée have to do with my grandmother's jewelry?" The look that passed between my parents in that moment told me everything I needed to know. Dad folded his newspaper carefully, and Mom suddenly became very interested in scraping the pancake pan. "Well," Mom said slowly, "we thought it would be nice for Emma to have some family heirlooms for the wedding." She picked out a few pieces she liked. They had given away my inheritance to my brother's fiancé. Family heirlooms that had been specifically left to me in my grandmother's will were now sitting in some stranger's jewelry box because they looked pretty with her wedding dress. I stood up so quickly that my chair fell backward. "You gave away Grandma's jewelry to Emma. The jewelry Grandma specifically left to me in her will." "Sophia, you are being dramatic," Dad said in that condescending tone that had always made me feel small. "Family shares with family. Emma is going to be family soon. And I am not family now. The silence that followed was deafening. Mom turned back to the stove and Dad picked up his newspaper again, both of them dismissing me like I was an unreasonable child throwing a tantrum over toys. That was when I realized the truth that had been staring me in the face for years. I was not their daughter. I was their backup plan, their safety net, their convenient source of money and emotional labor when they needed it. But when it came time to invest in someone's future, to show real love and support, they chose Jake every single time. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my bank statements from the past 5 years. The evidence was overwhelming. Every family emergency, every request for help, every guilt trip about money had come to me. When Jake needed help with college tuition, they called me. When Dad's business was struggling, they called me. When they wanted to renovate their kitchen, they called me. I had sent them over $30,000 in the past 2 years alone. Money I had convinced myself was helping the family stay afloat. Money that apparently had been funding Jake's wedding preparations while they sold my possessions behind my back. "How long have you been planning this?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. Mom looked confused by the question. "Planning what, honey? The car, the bedroom, the jewelry? How long have you been planning to erase me from this family?" "Sophia, you are being ridiculous," Dad said, not bothering to look up from his sports section. "We are not erasing you. We are just making practical decisions for the family's benefit." "Whose family?" Because clearly I am not part of the family that benefits from these decisions. I walked upstairs to what used to be my bedroom, now transformed into a home office, complete with Dad's desk and filing cabinets. Every trace of my childhood had been scrubbed away as if I had never existed in this house at all. That was when I made a decision that would change everything. I was done being their convenient daughter, their emotional and financial resource to be tapped whenever Jake needed something. If they wanted to treat me like an outsider, then I would become one. But first, I was going to make sure they understood exactly what they had lost. I spent that entire Christmas afternoon in the local library researching every legal option available to me, while my parents hosted their annual holiday party downstairs. The sound of laughter and celebration drifting up from below felt like salt in fresh wounds, but it also fueled my determination to make things right. The first call I made was to my grandmother's estate attorney, a sharp woman named Margaret Chen, who had handled Grandma Rose's will 3 years earlier. She remembered me immediately and was not pleased to hear about the jewelry situation. "Sophia, those pieces were specifically bequeathed to you in your grandmother's will. If your parents gave them away without your consent, that constitutes conversion, which is essentially theft under Connecticut law. What can I do about it? Document everything. Get proof of what was taken when it was given away, and to whom. I can file a civil suit to recover the items or their monetary value. The fact that they are family does not give them the right to dispose of your inheritance." My second call was to my auto insurance company. Since the Tesla was still registered in my name and covered under my policy, selling it without my knowledge constituted vehicle theft regardless of where it had been parked. "Ma'am, if someone sold your vehicle without authorization, that is grand theft auto," the claims adjuster explained. "You need to file a police report immediately. We will also need documentation of the sale to pursue recovery of the vehicle or its value." By evening, I had filed 2 police reports, initiated a civil suit for recovery of my inheritance, and discovered something that made my blood run cold. While reviewing the insurance paperwork for the Tesla, I found records showing that my parents had been listed as secondary drivers on the policy. But more importantly, I found evidence that they had been planning this betrayal for months. Hidden in Dad's home office filing cabinet were documents showing multiple insurance quotes for the Tesla dating back to October, appraisals from car dealers, and printed emails between my parents and Jake discussing the sale proceeds. They had been systematically planning to steal my car since at least 3 months before Christmas. But the real smoking gun was an email thread between Mom and Emma's mother discussing the jewelry. The messages, dating back to September, showed detailed photographs of each piece, with discussions about which items would look best with Emma's wedding dress. They had been planning to give away my inheritance before they had even told me about the car. I think the diamond tennis bracelet would be perfect for something borrowed, Mom had written. Rose always said it brought good luck in love. The casual way they discussed stealing from me was breathtaking in its cruelty. This was not a spur-of-the-moment decision made under financial pressure. This was a calculated, premeditated plan to transfer my property to Jake and Emma while keeping me in the dark. I photographed every document and forwarded them to Margaret, then sat down to make a list of every financial transaction I had made with my parents over the past 5 years. The number was staggering between direct cash gifts, loan payments I had covered for them, and various family emergencies I had funded. I had given them just over $47,000. Money that could have paid for Jake's wedding without touching my car or my inheritance. That night at dinner, I sat through their holiday celebration like an anthropologist studying an alien culture. Extended family members asked about my job and my life in Seattle, but my parents redirected every conversation back to Jake's upcoming wedding and how proud they were of their son's success. Uncle Robert, Dad's brother, mentioned seeing the Tesla in their driveway earlier in the year. "That is a beautiful car, Sophia. Must have cost you a fortune." "It did," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "Too bad. I will never see it again." Mom jumped in quickly. "Sophia is being dramatic. She decided to sell it to help with Jake's wedding costs." So generous of her. The lie came so easily, so smoothly, that I realized this was not their first time rewriting history to suit their narrative. How many other family stories had been adjusted to make Jake look better and me look selfish or ungrateful? After dinner, Jake called from Emma's family party, and my parents put him on speakerphone so everyone could wish him well. His voice was bright and cheerful as he thanked everyone for their support with the wedding planning. "Mom and Dad have been incredible," he gushed. "They even helped us cover the venue deposit when things got tight. Emma and I are so lucky to have family that believes in us." Not one mention of where that money had actually come from. Not one acknowledgement that his wedding was being funded by the theft of my property. In Jake's version of events, our parents were generous benefactors making sacrifices to support his happiness. I excused myself from the party early, claiming fatigue from my cross-country flight. But instead of going to bed, I spent the night in my hotel room creating a comprehensive plan for what I had started calling Operation Accountability. First, I would pursue every legal avenue available to recover my property and hold them responsible for their theft. The police reports were just the beginning. Second, I would document their lies and manipulations systematically, creating an undeniable record of their behavior patterns. Third, I would cut off all financial support immediately and permanently. No more family emergency funds, no more guilt-induced loans, no more playing the role of backup daughter when they needed money. But fourth and most importantly, I would make sure that everyone in our extended family knew exactly what kind of people they really were. Their reputation as loving, supportive parents was built on lies and manipulation, and it was time for the truth to come out. I opened my laptop and began typing a detailed email to my cousin Rachel, who had always been close to our family and would be attending Jake's wedding in 6 months. If my parents wanted to make this a family matter, then the family deserved to know what they had done. The next morning, I checked out of my hotel without saying goodbye and drove my rental car to the police station to provide additional documentation for my theft reports. Then I visited Margaret's office to review the civil suit paperwork and discuss strategy for recovering my grandmother's jewelry. "Sophia," Margaret said as I signed the final documents, "I want you to understand that pursuing this will likely destroy your relationship with your parents permanently. Are you prepared for that consequence?" I looked out her office window at the snow-covered town where I had grown up, where I had believed in the myth of family loyalty and unconditional love for 28 years. "Margaret," I said, "they destroyed our relationship when they decided I was worth less than my brother's wedding decorations. I am just making it official." The response to my email to cousin Rachel came within hours, and it was not what I expected. Instead of shock or disbelief, Rachel's reply contained a single line that changed everything. "Sophia, we need to talk. There are things about your parents that you do not know." We met that same evening at a coffee shop in downtown Hartford. far enough from my family's social circle to avoid unwanted attention. Rachel arrived looking nervous, clutching a manila folder that she placed on the table between us like evidence in a criminal trial. "I have been waiting for someone in the family to finally see through their act," she said without preamble. "What they did to you with the car and jewelry is horrible, but it is not the first time they have pulled something like this." She opened the folder and spread out documents that made my stomach drop. Bank statements, copies of checks, printed emails, and handwritten notes created a paper trail of financial manipulation spanning over a decade. "Remember when Grandma Rose was sick and your parents were managing her finances toward the end?" I nodded. Dad had power of attorney and had handled all of Grandma's bills and medical expenses during her final months. They stole over $20,000 from her accounts before she died. Money that was supposed to go to the grandchildren in her will got mysteriously reclassified as care expenses and caregiving fees they paid themselves. The documents Rachel showed me were devastating. Checks written from Grandma's account to my parents for vague services like home maintenance and medical care support, all signed with Dad's power of attorney privileges. But the real smoking gun was a series of bank withdrawals made in the weeks before Grandma's death, totaling exactly $23,000. "How do you know all this?" "Because I work at the bank where Grandma had her accounts," Rachel said quietly. "When unusual activity happens on elderly accounts, especially large withdrawals by power of attorney holders, we flag them for review." I could not say anything while the investigation was ongoing, but the statute of limitations ran out last year. Investigation. The state opened an elder abuse inquiry based on the suspicious transactions, but your parents covered their tracks well, and without Grandma alive to testify about whether she authorized the payments, the case went nowhere. I stared at the evidence in front of me, feeling like I was looking at strangers instead of my parents. "What else?" Rachel pulled out another set of documents. "Remember your Uncle Mike's construction business that went under about 8 years ago?" Uncle Mike was Dad's younger brother, a contractor who had built a solid reputation in the area before his business suddenly collapsed. The family story was that he had made poor financial decisions and lost everything due to his own mismanagement. Your parents sabotaged him deliberately. Dad was bidding against Mike for the same contracts and was feeding information about Mike's quotes to competing contractors. He also spread rumors about Mike's reliability to potential clients. The proof was in printed screenshots of text messages between Dad and various local business owners, messages that Rachel had obtained from her boyfriend, who worked for one of the construction companies involved. Dad convinced the Springfield Mall renovation committee that Mike's crew was unreliable just days before they were supposed to sign the contract. That job would have saved Mike's business. Instead, Dad's consulting company got hired to manage the project timeline. Dad does not do construction consulting. No, but he took a $15,000 fee for project oversight on a job his brother should have gotten. Mike lost his business, his house, and his family moved to Florida because they could not afford to stay here. Your parents never told you that Dad was directly responsible for destroying his own brother's livelihood. The pattern was becoming clear, and it was nauseating. My parents were not just selfish or thoughtless. They were predators who systematically destroyed anyone who stood between them and what they wanted, including their own family members. "There is more," Rachel said, producing a final set of documents. "Jake's college fund. What about it? It never existed. Every time Jake needed money for tuition, your parents called you for emergency financial help, right? They told you it was because unexpected expenses had drained their savings." I nodded, remembering multiple panicked phone calls about Jake's education hanging in the balance without my immediate assistance. They had over $60,000 in a college savings account that they opened when Jake was born, but they spent it on house renovations and a vacation to Europe the year before Jake started college. Rather than admit they had wasted his education fund on luxury purchases, they made you pay for his degree. The documentation was irrefutable. Bank statements showing the systematic depletion of Jake's education fund receipts for a kitchen remodel that cost $40,000, and booking confirmations for a 3-week European cruise that had cost another $18,000. I have been documenting their financial crimes for years, Rachel continued, but I needed someone with legal standing to pursue it. As their daughter, you have grounds to investigate their finances, especially regarding the theft of your inheritance from Grandma's estate. I sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that my entire family history was built on lies and theft. My parents were not struggling middle-class people making hard choices under financial pressure. They were systematic fraudsters who had spent decades stealing from their own relatives and covering their tracks with emotional manipulation. Why did not you tell me this before? Because until now you were part of their mythology. You believed you were helping family members in crisis. You thought you were being generous and loving. How could I tell you that your generosity was actually funding their criminal lifestyle? Rachel was right. If she had approached me a year ago with these accusations, I would have defended my parents and probably cut off contact with her for spreading malicious rumors about them. I had needed to experience their betrayal firsthand before I could see the truth about who they really were. What do we do now? Now we make sure they cannot hurt anyone else in this family. I have contacts at the state attorney's office who can reopen the elder abuse investigation with this new evidence. And with your theft reports already filed, we can establish a pattern of financial crimes that goes back years. I thought about Jake blissfully planning his wedding while wearing my grandmother's stolen jewelry and driving a car bought with money his parents had embezzled from their own relatives. Did he know the truth about how his perfect life was being funded, or was he another victim of their manipulation? What about Jake? How much does he know? Rachel's expression darkened. Jake knows exactly what they are. He has known for years. Remember when he graduated college and immediately got that high-paying job at the marketing firm? Yeah, he was really lucky to find something so quickly. Lucky nothing. That job went to Emma's cousin originally. Jake's offer letter is dated the same day that Dad made some phone calls threatening to pull his consulting contracts from companies that did business with Emma's family firm. Jake got the job through extortion, and he was fully aware of how Dad made it happen. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. Jake was not an innocent beneficiary of their parents' crimes. He was an active participant who understood that his success came at the expense of other people's livelihoods. So when they sold my car for his wedding, he knew exactly where that money was coming from, just like he knew where his college tuition money really came from, and just like he knows that the jewelry Emma is wearing belonged to you. I felt something cold and determined settle in my chest. This was not just about recovering my stolen property anymore. This was about stopping a family crime syndicate that had been operating for decades, destroying lives and relationships while maintaining a facade of respectability. Rachel, I said, gathering up the evidence, I think it is time for some consequences. The next phase of Operation Accountability was about to begin, and this time I was not going in alone. The family was about to discover what happened when their carefully constructed house of lies finally collapsed. Armed with Rachel's evidence and Margaret's legal expertise, I spent the next 3 months building an ironclad case that would expose my parents' decades of financial crimes. But I wanted more than just legal victory. I wanted public accountability that would prevent them from victimizing anyone else. The first domino fell in March when the state attorney's office reopened the elder abuse investigation into Grandma Rose's estate. With Rachel's banking records and my documentation of the inheritance theft, prosecutors now had evidence of a pattern spanning multiple victims. The local newspaper picked up the story when formal charges were filed. Prominent local couple charged in elder financial abuse case, read the headline in the Hartford Courant. The article detailed how my parents had systematically stolen from my grandmother while serving as her financial guardians, then disposed of inheritance property without beneficiary consent. But the real earthquake came when I posted my story on social media. I had spent weeks crafting a detailed Facebook post that laid out everything with receipts, photos of the stolen jewelry on Emma's social media accounts, documentation of the Tesla sale, bank records showing my parents' financial clout, support over the years, and evidence of their theft from multiple family members. I tagged every relative, family, friend, and community member who had ever praised my parents as pillars of integrity. The post went viral within hours. Comments poured in from people sharing their own experiences with my parents' manipulation. Mrs. Henderson from down the street revealed that my parents had borrowed $5,000 for a family emergency 2 years earlier and never repaid it. My high school friend's mother shared that Dad had overcharged her for consulting services and delivered substandard work. Even neighbors began sharing stories about my parents' suspicious financial behavior that they had previously dismissed. But the most devastating comment came from Uncle Mike's wife posting from Florida. "Thank you for finally telling the truth, Sophia. Your father destroyed our family's livelihood through lies and sabotage. Mike never recovered emotionally from losing his business, and we lost our home because of your parents' greed. We have been waiting 10 years for someone to expose who they really are." Jake called me within hours of the post going live, and his voice was shaking with rage. "Sophia, what the hell do you think you are doing? You are destroying our family over a stupid car, Jake. I know you knew where that money came from. I know you knew about the jewelry, about Grandma's stolen funds, about everything. You are not a victim here. You are an accomplice." The silence on the other end told me everything I needed to know. "Take down the post," he finally said. "Emma is crying, her family is asking questions, and Mom and Dad are talking about disowning you permanently." Good. Maybe Emma's family deserves to know they are marrying into a criminal enterprise. Criminal enterprise, Sophia, you sound insane. These are family matters, not crimes. Stealing $60,000 from your daughter is not a family matter, Jake. Embezzling from an elderly woman's estate is not a family matter. Destroying your own brother's business through sabotage is not a family matter. These are felonies. I hung up on him and immediately called Margaret to update her on Jake's reaction and threats. "Sophia, you need to be prepared for escalation. Cornered people do desperate things, and your family is about to face serious legal and social consequences. They might try to retaliate." She was right. Within days, my parents launched their own social media counterattack, painting me as an ungrateful daughter who was destroying the family because I had not gotten my way. They shared old photos of family holidays and birthday celebrations, writing lengthy posts about their sacrifices, raising an entitled child who had turned against them over material possessions. But their strategy backfired spectacularly when people started fact-checking their claims in the comments. Rachel posted bank records showing the actual timeline of financial transactions. Uncle Mike shared documentation of Dad's sabotage of his business. Even Emma's own social media posts worked against them, showing her wearing my grandmother's jewelry at engagement parties, while my parents claimed the inheritance had been donated to charity. The social pressure became unbearable for them. Dad's consulting business lost 3 major clients within 2 weeks. Mom was quietly asked to step down from her volunteer positions at the local library and historical society. Their church community, which had always held them up as examples of Christian family values, began distancing themselves as more details emerged. But the final blow came from an unexpected source: Emma's family. Emma's mother contacted me directly after discovering that the jewelry her daughter had been wearing was stolen inheritance. Mrs. Williams was a retired federal prosecutor who understood exactly what kind of legal liability her family faced if they knowingly possessed stolen property. "Miss Sophia, I want you to know that we had no idea these items belonged to you. Emma is returning everything immediately, and we are reconsidering our support for this wedding, given what we have learned about your brother's character and your parents' criminal behavior." She arranged for the jewelry to be returned through Margaret's law office, along with a formal letter documenting that Emma's family had unknowingly received stolen property and were returning it to its rightful owner. The wedding, scheduled for just 2 months away, began falling apart as vendors learned about the criminal charges and worried about payment with potentially stolen funds. The venue canceled their contract when local news coverage made them nervous about hosting a celebration funded by fraud. Emma's bridesmaids started dropping out as the scandal spread through their social circles. Jake called me one final time, and this time his voice was broken rather than angry. "Sophia, please. Emma is talking about calling off the wedding. Her family wants nothing to do with us now. You got what you wanted. Everyone knows the truth. Can we please just try to work this out as a family, Jake? You had multiple opportunities to do the right thing. When you saw Mom giving away my jewelry, you could have stopped it. When you cashed that check from my stolen car, you could have refused it. When you got that job through Dad's extortion, you could have declined it. You made your choices. What do you want from me? I will pay you back for the car. I will make sure Emma returns. The jewelry, I will do whatever it takes to fix this. What I want is for you to face the consequences of your actions, just like I had to face the consequences of trusting people who never deserved it. The conversation ended with Jake crying, but I felt nothing but cold satisfaction. For the first time in my adult life, the people who had systematically taken advantage of my love and generosity were experiencing real accountability for their choices. The implosion of my family's carefully constructed facade happened faster than anyone expected. Within 6 weeks of my social media post going viral, my parents faced a cascade of consequences that destroyed their reputation, their business relationships, and their financial stability. The criminal charges moved forward rapidly once other victims began coming forward with similar stories. The district attorney's office received reports from 5 additional families who had been financially manipulated by my parents over the past decade. Each case followed the same pattern my parents would identify. Vulnerable people facing crises offer help and support, then gradually take control of their finances before systematically stealing from them. Mrs. Chen, an elderly widow from their neighborhood, had lost $8,000 when my parents convinced her to let them manage her late husband's estate sale. Mr. Rodriguez, a struggling single father, had been charged inflated rates for Dad's consulting services, while Dad simultaneously sabotaged his applications for business grants. The emerging pattern painted a picture of predators who specifically targeted people in vulnerable positions. Dad's business license was suspended pending the outcome of the criminal investigation. Mom lost her part-time job at the law firm where she had worked for 12 years, when partners decided they could not afford the liability of employing someone under investigation for financial crimes. Their mortgage company began foreclosure proceedings when they defaulted on payments, apparently having relied on stolen funds to maintain their lifestyle for years. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was the complete disintegration of Jake's relationship with Emma and her family. Emma's parents hired their own attorney to investigate whether their family had any legal exposure from the stolen jewelry situation. During that process, they discovered that Jake had lied to Emma about numerous aspects of his background and finances. The job he claimed to have earned through merit had actually been obtained through his father's extortion tactics. The family heirlooms he had presented as gifts were stolen property. Even his college degree had been paid for with money embezzled from other family members. Emma called off the wedding 3 weeks before the ceremony, posting a dignified statement on social media, explaining that she could not marry someone whose entire life had been built on deception and stolen resources. She returned the engagement ring Jake had bought with proceeds from my car sale and moved back in with her parents while she reconsidered her future. Jake's response to this rejection revealed exactly who he really was underneath the charming facade he had maintained for years. He showed up at Emma's workplace, causing such a scene that security had to escort him from the building. He sent dozens of text messages and voicemails alternating between desperate apologies and angry accusations that Emma was abandoning him over family drama that was not his fault. He even contacted Emma's friends and co-workers, trying to convince them that Emma was making a mistake and that he was the real victim in the situation. The harassment escalated until Emma's family obtained a restraining order against Jake, which was granted immediately when the judge reviewed the evidence of his increasingly unstable behavior. Meanwhile, my parents' legal troubles deepened as investigators uncovered additional financial crimes. The state attorney's office discovered that Dad had been using his consulting business to launder money stolen from elderly clients, creating fake invoices for services never rendered, and using legitimate business accounts to hide fraudulent transactions. Mom's role was more extensive than anyone had initially realized. She had been systematically identifying potential victims through her volunteer work and social connections, then feeding information about their financial situations to Dad so he could target them more effectively. Her access to estate planning documents through the law firm had allowed them to identify elderly people with substantial assets and no close family oversight. The investigation revealed that they had stolen over $200,000 from various victims over the course of 8 years, using sophisticated methods to avoid detection until Rachel's banking expertise finally exposed their operation. Local media coverage intensified as more details emerged. The Hartford Courant ran a 3-part series titled The Neighborhood Con Artists, detailing how my parents had used their reputation as upstanding community members to gain access to victims' finances. Television news stations picked up the story when the criminal charges expanded to include organized fraud and conspiracy. The social consequences were swift and brutal. Neighbors who had considered my parents close friends began sharing stories about suspicious interactions they had previously dismissed. The country club, where they had been members for 15 years, revoked their membership. Their church asked them to stop attending services until the legal issues were resolved, but perhaps the most telling reaction came from people who had genuinely cared about them before learning the truth. Mrs. Patterson, their next-door neighbor for over 20 years, gave an interview to the local news that perfectly captured how completely my parents had fooled everyone around them. "I thought I knew them," she said, looking genuinely heartbroken. "They were always the first to offer help when someone in the neighborhood was struggling. Now I realize they were not being helpful. They were hunting for their next victims. It makes me question my judgment about people entirely." Even their longtime attorney dropped them as clients when he realized the extent of their criminal activity and the potential damage to his own reputation from continued association with them. I watched all of this unfold from Seattle, feeling a complex mixture of satisfaction and sadness. The satisfaction came from seeing justice finally served after decades of manipulation and theft. But the sadness was real too. These were people I had loved and trusted for 28 years, and discovering who they really were felt like grieving the death of the family I thought I had. Rachel kept me updated on developments as they happened, and her reports painted a picture of two people whose entire world was collapsing around them. They had no friends left, no income, no community support, and no family members willing to help them navigate the crisis they had created. "They keep calling people asking for character references for the court proceedings," Rachel told me during one of our weekly phone calls. "But everyone they ask just refers them to the news articles about their crimes." Even Uncle Robert told Dad that he could not in good conscience vouch for someone who destroyed his own brother's life. The house where I had grown up was scheduled for auction to pay legal fees and restitution to victims. My parents were facing the possibility of significant prison time if convicted on all charges. Jake had moved back in with them after losing his job, when his employer learned about his family's criminal activities and his own role in the conspiracy. The family that had once seemed so perfect, so successful, so worthy of admiration, had revealed itself to be exactly what it always was: a criminal enterprise that destroyed lives while maintaining a facade of respectability. Justice was finally being served, but the cost of that justice was the complete destruction of every relationship and institution my parents had spent decades building through deception. 18 months later, I stood in the courthouse as the judge read the final sentencing for my parents' fraud conviction. Dad received 4 years in federal prison and was ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. Mom got 3 years in community service, with the lighter sentence reflecting her cooperation in helping investigators recover stolen assets and identify additional victims. Jake pled guilty to conspiracy charges in exchange for testimony against our parents. His sentence included 2 years, probation, community service, and an order to pay restitution for his role in the crimes. The plea agreement allowed him to avoid prison time, but his cooperation had permanently destroyed any remaining relationship with our parents. Watching them in orange jumpsuits, flanked by court officers, felt surreal. These were the people who had raised me, who had taught me about right and wrong, who had been the foundation of my understanding about family and loyalty. The cognitive dissonance between those childhood memories and the reality of their criminal conviction was something I was still processing in therapy. But alongside the complex grief of losing my family, I felt a profound sense of vindication. Every victim had been compensated from the recovery of stolen assets and the sale of my parents' property. The Tesla had been recovered from Jake's friend who had purchased it in good faith, and insurance covered the difference in value. Grandma Rose's jewelry was back in my possession, and I planned to create a memorial display in my Seattle apartment to honor her memory properly. More importantly, the legal proceedings had established a clear public record of my parents' crimes, ensuring that they could never again use their charm and reputation to manipulate vulnerable people. The most unexpected positive outcome was the strengthening of relationships with extended family members who had been kept in the dark about my parents' true nature. Uncle Mike and his family had moved back to Connecticut after the court-ordered restitution gave them the financial resources to restart his construction business. We had reconnected in a way that felt genuine and healing, bonded by shared experience of surviving my parents' manipulation. Rachel and I had become much closer, united by our role in bringing justice to the family. She had received a commendation from the State Banking Commission for her work identifying financial elder abuse and had been promoted to head of their fraud prevention department. But the most meaningful relationship development happened 6 months after the sentencing, when Emma reached out to me through social media. We met for coffee in Hartford during one of my visits to Connecticut, and she surprised me with her perspective on everything that had happened. "Sophia, I want to thank you for exposing the truth before I married into that family," she said. "I know it cost you everything, and I know Jake probably blames you for ruining his life. But you saved me from making the biggest mistake of my life." Emma had completed her master's degree in social work and was working with a nonprofit that helped families recover from financial fraud. She understood better than most people how devastating my parents' crimes had been for their victims. "I keep thinking about how different my life would have been if I had married Jake and only discovered the truth years later, maybe after we had children. The courage it took for you to speak up when everyone would have preferred you stay silent, that is something I will never forget." We had stayed in touch since then, and she had become one of my closest friends despite the bizarre circumstances of our connection. My career had flourished in ways I never expected. The skills I had developed during the investigation, financial analysis, evidence documentation, and victim advocacy, had led to opportunities in forensic accounting and fraud prevention. I had been recruited by a major tech company to head their internal audit department with a salary increase that finally allowed me to buy my dream home in Seattle. More importantly, I had built a chosen family of friends and colleagues who valued honesty, integrity, and genuine support rather than the conditional love and financial exploitation I had grown up thinking was normal. My therapist helped me understand that the grief I felt was not just about losing my family, but about mourning the family I had thought I had. The parents who had seemed loving and supportive had never actually existed. They had been carefully constructed personas designed to maintain access to my emotional and financial resources. "What you experienced was not family dysfunction, Doctor," Martinez explained during one of our sessions. "It was organized financial abuse disguised as family relationships. Recognizing that difference is crucial for your healing and for preventing similar exploitation in future relationships." The therapy had been transformative in helping me establish healthy boundaries and recognize the warning signs of manipulation that I had been trained to ignore since childhood. Looking back now, I realize that exposing my parents' crimes had not just been about recovering my stolen property or getting justice for their victims. It had been about refusing to enable their continued abuse of vulnerable people and breaking the cycle of manipulation that had defined our family dynamics for generations. The story had also resonated far beyond our family situation. The Hartford Courant series about the case had been picked up by national media as an example of how financial elder abuse often involves family members who use emotional manipulation to access and steal resources from their victims. I had been interviewed for several articles about recognizing and reporting financial fraud within families, and my story had helped other people find the courage to expose similar abuse in their own situations. 6 months ago, I received a letter from a woman in Oregon who had read about my case online. She had used my story as a template for exposing her own family's financial manipulation, and the investigation had helped recover over $50,000 stolen from her elderly father's estate. Your willingness to sacrifice your family relationships for the sake of justice gave me permission to do the same, she wrote. Thank you for showing that family loyalty does not mean enabling criminal behavior. As I finished writing this story, I realized that the most important lesson from this experience was not about revenge or justice, although both had been important for healing. The real lesson was about the difference between genuine love and conditional manipulation, and the courage required to walk away from people who use family bonds as weapons for exploitation. My parents had taught me that family meant sacrificing yourself for others' benefit, staying silent about harmful behavior, and accepting abuse as the price of belonging. But real family, the kind I had built with friends like Emma and Rachel and colleagues who had become true chosen siblings, meant mutual support, honest communication, and respect for each other's autonomy and well-being. Have you ever discovered that people you trusted completely were living double lives built on lies and manipulation? Have you found the strength to choose justice over family loyalty when those values came into conflict? I would love to hear your stories in the comments below. Sometimes the precious, most powerful healing comes from knowing we are not alone in these experiences. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe for more real-life stories about finding courage in impossible situations. And please share this video with anyone who might need to hear that choosing truth over comfort is always the right decision, even when it costs everything you thought you knew about family. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes the family we choose becomes more real and more loving than the family we were born into. The justice we create for ourselves and others can be the foundation for building the authentic relationships we truly deserve.